It's Christmas in Walnut Grove. What could go wrong? Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hello, everyone.
And this is our season 10 finale.
Ooh.
Oh, I know. It feels like we've been crossing the frontier for years now.
It does. It feels like quite a journey. A lot of trials and tribulations along the way, but here we are.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Our horses are drinking some water at the stream. And today we're going to be talking about Little House on the Prairie.
We certainly are. And let me tell you, this is a show that we've talked about doing for maybe as long as we've had the podcast.
Maybe, yeah.
The idea's at least been out there.
That sounds right. Yeah. You kind of, as someone, as your friend Ryan recently said on our Facebook group, you can't talk about this period without talking about Michael Landon. And although I think we've mentioned him in passing, we certainly haven't done one of his shows.
Well, it's time to rectify that situation. And yeah, here we go. And Michael Landon, what a career he had. Television star, for decades, and one of the big stars in NBC in our beloved wilderness years of NBC.
That's right. Was Bonanza on NBC too?
Yes, Bonanza was on NBC as well.
So he was in the NBC part of that family.
His last project was actually a CBS project that he was working on at his death. I think they aired the pilot for it, but it would have been a CBS show. I think it was called Us.
I don't think I realized he was only 54 when he passed away. So the amount of stuff he did on TV in a relatively short life is pretty impressive too.
Yeah, and especially when you consider the fact that he was a very hands-on producer. He wrote many of the episodes of Little House on the Prairie, directed many of the episodes too, so he was not just an actor for hire.
Yeah, and Father Murphy as well.
That's right. And, some movies here and there, and an interesting guy, really, Mike. I got a book, kind of just a simple kind of newsstand size, paperback a while ago. And when I knew we were going to cover Little House on the Prairie, I read the book a while ago. It's called Michael Landon, His Triumph and Tragedy by Eileen Joyce. And I think it came out not too long after his passing. And I have a feeling it might be kind of a quickie deal. It's not referenced, but I think it draws on a lot of newspaper interviews and things like that. But it's still an interesting look at the man, and I learned a lot that I really didn't know what an interesting life he had, and what a traumatic childhood, and just really what a perfectionist he was, and how driven and work oriented he was. Really kind of an interesting dude.
You looked at his hair and didn't realize he was a perfectionist?
Point well taken. Now he did dye his hair, I think, throughout pretty much the entire run of Little House on the Prairie. Although at the end, I guess he let it go natural. But that's not a knock on him. He still had a beautiful mane.
Yes, I remember we talked about that would be a Hollywood scandal that came out that his hair wasn't real.
Fortunately, I have not uncovered any research to indicate that that's the case.
Everything seems to suggest that it was real.
But an interesting guy, and by all accounts, he was the main creative force to the point where he pretty much drove out the original executive producer of the show, and the show represented his vision. So he gets credit for it, whether you like the show, whether you dislike the show. It can pretty much all go on Michael Landon's shoulders. And boy, yeah, you and I we've had reason to encounter the work for professional reasons several times throughout the years.
Yes, and in fact, I would say that's the bulk of how I've watched this show.
Okay, so you didn't watch it when it was on?
No, I have a memory of disliking it.
Really?
Yeah, but I don't know why or what, I just know we didn't really watch it out, and I'm a little surprised because I'm sure it's the kind of thing my mom would have liked. So maybe she was watching it somewhere else. I mean, it just would have fit. Been up her alley for various reasons. I don't know if she read the books when she was a kid, but her parents were from that part of the world, and me not. They're a little younger than these characters, or born a little later, but really not too far off. And that's one of those things you learn, that the real Laura Ingalls Wilder lived until she was 90.
Wow.
So she died 20 years before the show premiered.
Jeez.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Because she was born in 1867, and I think it died in 57. I think that's right. So more like 15 years. and I didn't watch it much. I was aware of it, of course, and knew the gist. I remember also at some point, seeing someone reading a book at school and being surprised that there were books.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I did watch Highway to Heaven.
Huh. Now, see, that one I never watched. Little House, I believe I did watch. Not necessarily as a thing, but I remember seeing bits of it in reruns, I think. And then, as I got older and sort of like sampled the show a little bit, I found that it was kind of hard to watch. Like, on one hand, it was all over the place, but on the other hand, it was always like cut episodes, and it had a lot of problematic home video releases. So, I think that's one of the reasons it took us a while to get to this point, because we were kind of waiting for it to be, in a reliable situation where we could access it easily. And now it is. It's in multiple places streaming. I think most episodes uncut in their original form. And let me give a quick shout out to my cousin Kevin, who I won't get into the details, but he helped me with access to Little House on the Prairie for this particular season, and I appreciate it. So Kevin, I know you're listening. Thank you. But I watched a little bit as a kid, and I think I kind of enjoyed it. But I'm kind of a sucker for these like family shows, Mike, with like these touches of melodrama and comedy. I watched every episode of 8 is Enough, and some other shows I've watched over the years, so I find this very, very watchable program.
Yeah, the more I've seen of it, I recognize, one, there's a certain amount of skill involved, and I think the episode we're going to talk about shows a good deal of that. But it is also fun in a sort of a different way, because can be so melodramatic.
I think it appeals to so many different types of people. There's people that respond to they see it as a faith-centric show, which is interesting. This episode does get into that, but not all of them are like that. The family values type of show. There's a certain segment that kind of sees it as camp, I think, for the melodrama and the soap opera aspects. It's got a comedy. That there's some people that just like seeing, Michael Landon notoriously shirtless in many episodes.
Uh-huh.
Do you consider Little House on the Prairie a Western? I mean, I think it is, right?
Yeah, I think,
It's not...
Yeah.
It's not Gunsmoke, but it's on the frontier. It's in the time period.
Right. It is, because most Westerns are also post-Civil War, right? So it's pretty much the same time period as Bonanza, I would guess. And because it's the early 1870s, I think, when it starts. So, yeah, I think a semi-historical Western. There aren't shootouts and showdowns and all of that. I'm sure there's at least one.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there in the 9 seasons, but yeah, it is. It's the front. It's a Midwestern.
Yeah, yeah. So it could appeal to just people that like westerns or period pieces as well.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna say, obviously a different time period, but it probably appeals to the same kind of people who like the Waltons for a lot of the same reasons. An interesting thing I saw a few places was that, first of all, that people think the books are kind of watered down because they were written for children. So, she left out some of the rougher stuff that she witnessed or happened in her life. And yet other people think the show is a watered down version of the books. Given how much disaster happens in presumably both of them, it makes you wonder about how much disaster actually, how much worse it was.
Yeah, I think both of those statements are probably fair. I think I told you, Mike, that I tried to read the books aloud a few years ago to my kids, and Lori, and as a family. I decided, we're going to have some read aloud time. And boy, we're in for a rude awakening when we first started reading that first book. There's like 3 pages of a pig being butchered or something like that. Like in things like that, like in real exasperating detail about process, like the narrative will stop for this kind of thing. And I forget what the line was, but I read one thing Michael Landon said early on was, I'm going to say it's a pig being butchered, but I don't think that's what it is. But he said, have you read the books? To somebody that said, that they're not following the books. He said, there's stuff about, pig being slaughtered. He said, I can't film that, how do I film that and he's got a real point. And apparently that was the big dispute. Ed Friendly was an NBC executive and a producer on Laugh-In who worked with the Ingalls Water Estate to bring the show to NBC, and NBC had a contract with Michael Landon, and Michael Landon quickly became not just a star but the executive producer, and all the grittiness, Ed Friendly accused him of eliminating it from the show. But I think there's some, and Ed Friendly said, famously said something like the only thing they didn't have was a Cadillac. He thought that they were too well-to-do, the Ingalls family, in the show. But I think Michael Landon had an eye towards, okay, we can dramatize we can melodramatize the rigors of this kind of life without having them live in total squalor. And he was more interested in portraying, his vision of family life and things like that. And yeah, I think he did probably drain a lot of the grittiness of the books and the real life to it. But I don't necessarily blame him for that. But Ed Friendly was very bitter about it and was a vocal critic of Michael Landon for years.
So he wasn't friendly.
Not towards Michael Landon.
But when it is serious, they're still dealing with like crops dying, and Mary still goes blind, and they lose a child, which happened in real life, which apparently isn't in the books.
Yeah.
And they're still at times itinerant, which confused me when I would see these in our professional capacity. I'm like, wait, why aren't they in one? They're only in the Prairie. In one episode, but for a while they're in Walnut Grove, and then they're working in a hotel, and then they're back in Walnut Grove. But then there's some episodes where they leave to go try to strike it rich with gold, and then there's death, and it still seems pretty. It's not suburban life.
And in the episode we're going to talk about is very grim too. Let me give you a specific example, which I think is in that book I read. Michael Landon claimed that Ed Friendly was complaining about he wanted the kids to be barefoot. And Landon saying, his side of it was like, well, I can't have, kids running around. We're filming these in the Simi Valley in California. I can't have the kids running around barefoot. It's like a safety thing, They don't need to be, we don't need that degree of realism, was his point, in order to make the show. But that was an example he gave of something that Ed Friendly complained about, wanting them to be, more visible signs of poverty. And Michael Landon looked at it, not just from a creative standpoint, but, the welfare of the kids in the set.
I think I would agree with him. It seems like a bad idea.
And although Michael Landon had personal demons in his own life, and the other thing was he was a big perfectionist, and he did not work well for other people. He had to be in charge of everything. However, by most all accounts, just about everybody on the set and the cast and the crew really got along with him and thought that he was a very, very professional. And pretty much everybody says if you did your job well and treated him with respect, he treated you with respect and made sure that everybody, was able to leave on time. He got in his shows under budget and got the job done. So,
and it seems like he was particularly good with the kids. So that's certainly when they talk about it now. I was just watching some recent interview with Melissa Gilbert, and she told a story about like the one time she didn't know her lines, and he sort of, he caught her at it, and then he took her aside and they rehearsed it, and she got it, and he's like, okay, that's the last time that's going to happen. And it was. But he wasn't ever mean about it or anything. He was just stern.
He could be angry, but he drank a lot during it. There's a lot of casual drinking during the show, but he protected the kids. And Alison Arngrims, who played Nellie, I read her book as well, and it's excellent, by the way. And she gives a lot of detail on making the show. But I think her big point was like he treated the kids as individuals. He didn't talk down to them. He gave them standards and expected them to be professional, and the kids really responded to that and appreciated it, and that made for a very harmonious set. And I think pound for pound, there haven't been a lot of child star issues with Little House on the Prairie compared to other shows. So
Jason Bateman got a start there. Shannon Doherty got her start there. She had some issues.
Yeah. Speaking of people that might have some issues, I watched one of the early episodes. I was surprised to see a young Sean Penn in the background.
Oh, yeah, I read about that.
And I checked later, and I was like, holy cow, that is Sean Penn.
And his dad directed it, right?
Yes.
He would stand out, I think, even as a 10-year-old.
Yes, but I think his dad might have been one of the directors that didn't get along with Michael Landon. He wasn't willing to do it his way. If you notice, he used a few reliable directors, including himself. And so there's really, like we said, kind of a real singular vision on this show. And I find this show very watchable, and I plan to keep watching a lot of episodes. But one thing I've not done is watched a lot of the later years, like the last couple seasons. That doesn't interest me as much, and I haven't seen a lot of those, and I'm not sure if I'm going to watch a lot of those. Just talking about, I think when Laura gets married, that's pretty much it for me. I'm most interested in maybe the first 3 or 4 seasons especially.
Yeah, that does seem more interesting to me. And the later it goes, the closer it gets to not modern life, but maybe some more recognizable things. I don't know if they get electricity. I feel like they get a telephone. There's a telephone, maybe just at the Mercantile or something. But I was watching an episode, a Halloween episode, where they're kind of, this episode they have lanterns too, but they're like in a house with lanterns, and I had the thought, why don't they just turn on the lights? And I'm like, oh wait, yeah.
Well, yeah, the episode we're going to talk about, I lamented the fact that they didn't just contact each other on their cell phones.
Right. I didn't lament it, but I did think at one point, boy, a lot of problems would have been solved with cell phones here.
Now, of course, in the 1970s, this still would have been a reasonable story premise because they didn't have cell phones back then. But
And it's nice that it was the 1970s because like the men didn't have to put on fake beards and sideburns and stuff.
that's right.
They're already ready.
I will say though, we almost could have split this one in two episodes because it just seems like the later years are probably a totally different show. And I didn't know this, but apparently Michael Landon, I guess the last season they tried to rebrand it as A New Beginning, and Charles was out of the show pretty much. But he didn't. I think he did the show like a year or two more than he wanted to because NBC was playing hardball about Father Murphy. So he agreed to do a little bit more, kind of on a reduced scale, and then just stayed behind the scenes and wasn't an actor. But he kept the show on maybe a year or two more than he wanted to. He was, I think, done with it, but NBC he wanted to keep Father Murphy on. So I mean, I think even he was done with it after like 6 or 7 years, and most of the cast was by that time too. The original cast, I should say.
By the way, if you see pictures of the real Charles Ingalls, he didn't have Michael Landon hair, but he did have a lot of hair.
Oh, really?
And a kind of cool old-timey beard. Like it's just a chin, not an Abe Lincoln, but just something sticking off his chin.
Let's check that out.
So, I mean, it didn't look like it had been professionally brushed.
No.
Blow-dried or anything, but at least he had hair.
Well, it's another thing that's interesting about Little House is it seems to be underestimated. But it was on 9 seasons, over 200 episodes and movies, and I was looking up. I don't think it won any. It might have won a few Emmys for like cinematography. It seemed to do well in that category. But like best show, screenwriting, acting, didn't get like any of that stuff. But it was really kind of joke. But during those wilderness years of NBC, it was one of NBC's biggest hits. And for at least a couple of years, I think it was maybe its only real hit. It was probably the biggest primetime show on NBC for a stretch of like all things considered. For about 5 or 6 years, it was probably like the number one primetime show on the network, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I imagine it had some of the same, and still does, that sort of people holding the family aspect against it.
Yeah, and especially like in the late 70s, the mid to late 70s, it would be a good alternative to a lot of the more permissive stuff happening, all over the TV dial, really. But still, and even a smaller TV universe and all that stuff. But it was a top 10 show for a while, and quite an achievement, I think, to do anything for 200 episodes. I got to tip my hat.
Well, should we get into it?
Yeah, I think we should. And maybe one more thing I'll say is that one of the things that we've talked about over the years is, and you've already kind of alluded to this, is just the sheer amount of tragedy and catastrophe that happens on this show. And it's become kind of a running joke with us. So naturally, we picked an episode that has tragedy and catastrophe.
Right.
I mean, it's funny because like going through the episodes now and looking at them, there are a lot of like just kind of pure comedy episodes. But boy, there's a lot of episodes where just really bad things happen.
Yeah. Or just they're even if they're not comedy episodes, they're just small episodes in the sense of it's just more like a small lesson.
Right.
A little moral lesson, like the one I was telling you about, where the Sunday school kids want to buy a Bible for the pastor for his birthday, and Mary and Laura are in charge of the money they've raised, and so Laura, being precocious, let's say, looks in the catalog and sees if they buy some patent medicines, they can double their money, and of course that doesn't work out. And the Charles makes them tell the truth to the pastor, and then he turns it into some lesson that makes them look great. He's like, everyone wants to get me a Bible. That's what they do. But these kids, they got me a wooden box to put my Bible in. And of course, meanwhile, Nellie and Willie have bought a Bible on their own to show everyone up, and they have to hide it. The whole Olsen family is embarrassed. So
That's Reverend Alden, right?
Yes.
Dabbs Greer, I believe. And I think one of the interesting things about the series is just the large cast of characters and regulars on the show. And Reverend Alden isn't in this episode, but a lot of people who watch the show would remember him. He was kind of made frequent appearances and, usually made an impression. There's a lot of vivid characters, sometimes some maybe caricatures, but I think it helps make the show stand out. You've got all these memorable people on it.
Yeah, it has less of that thing like you have in a lot of times, like in like a high school show, where it doesn't. There's just like a student who shows up for one episode.
Yeah.
The idea that there's a consistent group of people in town rather than different people showing up all the time. I mean, there are people, they come from out of town, but
yes, Now, that's an excellent point you're making, but this episode is actually an exception to that, I think. I guess maybe there's some dramatic reasons for introducing, but I believe this episode introduces some people that aren't in the rest of the series. Some of the adult characters in this, I assumed they were maybe like just people that I hadn't seen before. But when I looked up their credits, I think this was like the only episode, or maybe they had been in as a different character. So talking about like the McInnes and Bowers, I think two of the main male supporting characters in this.
Well, the Bowers guy, they live outside of town. I'll accept that. I mean, McGinnis runs the feed store, so I'm not sure. Seems like he would have been around before, but
well,
he's certainly not going to be around after.
I think your point is still well taken, though, that they took pains to establish like a very big cast and found ways to use them in many ways. So you did have this like sense of a real lived-in town. I guess Lars Hansen in this one, is an example of that, like a regular, not in the main credits or anything, but was still felt like a main character.
Yeah, he's the
like runs the mill, I guess.
The lumber mill.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one is called Blizzard and directed by regular director William D. Claxton. So this was a Christmas episode, and I'm sure you have all the details beyond that.
Yes, it was a Christmas episode set mostly on Christmas Eve, but it premiered after Christmas Eve and actually premiered after New Year's. So it debuted January 3rd, 1977 on NBC, and I'll tell you what else was on that night. CBS had maybe the most regular kind of conventional lineup. It had a New Year's Eve episode of Rhoda at 8, followed by an episode of Phyllis at 8:30. 9, it had Maud. And then 9:30, All's Fair, which I believe we've talked about on our Facebook group. This was a Richard Crenna, Patty Duke, I think, sitcom from Norman Lear's company. 10 o'clock was the kind of failed primetime soap Executive Suite. ABC countered with Captain and Tennille at 8 o'clock, and that particular episode had several members of the cast of Happy Days. Not Henry Winkler, but several others. And then at 9 o'clock, a TV movie called Green Eyes about a Vietnam vet going back the country, looking at war orphans and trying to find the son that he left behind. NBC at 8 had Little House, followed by Judge Horton and the Scottsboro Boys, another quite serious TV movie based on real events in 1930s Alabama. And yeah, that had Ken Kercheval, Vera Miles, Arthur Hill. So interesting night of television with the ABC Monday Night Movie and the NBC Monday Night Movie being very serious efforts. And then, of course, Little House at 8 on NBC.
And also a pretty serious episode of that. So a heavy night on NBC.
Right. Heavy, man. Real heavy.
Yeah. Can I guess as far as some of the Happy Days performers on Captain Tennille?
Yes, you may, as long as I have them in front. Yes.
Anson Williams?
Anson Williams is not listed in this.
What? Donnie Most?
Donnie Most, yes.
Okay. That's all.
Okay. That's really...
Chachi?
No, not Chachi, but Joni. So this is a repeat, by the way. According to ultimate70s.com, in addition to Donnie Most, we had Ron Howard, Cindy Williams, Aaron Moran, and Roz Kelly, who was Pinky Tuscadero. Although I don't know if she had been that yet on Happy Days. I think she probably had been. And Gabe Kaplan, for some reason. I guess you don't really need a reason to have Gabe Kaplan on your show.
No. Maybe he did some stand-up. Maybe they did a sketch where the Happy Days kids were the Sweat Hogs.
Ooh. Good call. Good call.
Or one where Gabe Kaplan was Fonz.
Well, it's an embarrassment of riches for the staff of Captain Tennille that week, for sure.
Yes.
Many possibilities.
Right. The captain took off.
Yeah.
And left the ship to Tennille.
Yeah.
Okay. So this one opens with a man, I guess he's the station master, waking up in his office at the train station and in Thief River Falls. And it's very windy outside, and then he gets a telegraph signal coming in, and we see what he wrote down, and that there's a heavy storm coming, up to 4 feet of snow, and they're holding all northbound traffic. And then throughout the episode, there's a recurring motif of him or the station master in Springfield getting these telegraph signals with more information as the storm gets worse.
Yes, and to all those who say that, we've lost a lot because, cell phones make a lot of these stories unrealistic today, I say let's focus on what we're missing by not having the dramatic action of a telegraph in action. The dots and dashes, it's great television seeing a telegraph play out.
It really does add some tension to this episode because they're further up the line, so they're getting worse weather before, and we keep getting moments of, everyone's just like, oh, it's snowing, it's nice.
Yeah, because at first, things look fine.
Yep. And then the next scene is Charles and Mr. Edwards, Victor French, the great Victor French.
Yes, we deliver. Not only do we deliver on Little House on the Prairie around here, we deliver on Victor French too.
That's right.
That's just how we do things around here.
And they're in, it turns out, Springfield, I guess Minnesota.
Yeah, there's a Springfield everywhere, so it's hard to be sure.
Yes, right, yeah. As far as we know, this is not the Simpsons Springfield.
No, I don't think so.
They didn't pass. What's the neighboring town?
Shelbyville.
Shelbyville. Yeah, they didn't pass Shelbyville on the way back. But they picked up a bunch of stuff. I guess came from the catalog, the All Sainted catalog.
Yes.
And to take back to town, and they're going to make various deliveries for Christmas.
They're cutting it close, but hey, at least it came in, huh?
And while they're there, the telegraph comes in, and there's a storm at International Falls. But I believe he says something about that. As long as it's not snowing in Thief Falls, they're fine. Or Thief River Falls. So then we see them. They deliver a rifle to this guy you mentioned, Jim Bowers, who's got this rifle for his kid Joey, who's he's already in town. There's going to be some sort of Christmas soiree, and he and Edwards get into a little fun kind of macho posturing about their shooting ability.
Yeah.
Then in town, we see Joey longing after this rifle in the window of the Olson's Mercantile. And Willie Olson, he's worried they're going to be late for school, I guess. And he's he says his dad says, no one's going to buy that rifle because they can get it for half the price in the catalog. Or he says it like this. And then we see there's snow in Thief River Falls. And then Charles and Edwards go to the Walnut Grove Feed and Seed. And this is where the McGinnises are. Ted and Lottie. So before they arrive, Ted and Lottie are talking, and Lottie's working on the books. She's looking for a missing $17, and he gives kind of a sheepish look. And it seems like he probably, as we do find out later, got her Christmas gift by skimming money.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, but he's trying to convince her to go ahead and go to town and or go to the Olson's house, which is also the Mercantile. All the women are there preparing for the Christmas party, and he tells her Christmas is for hugging, not for bookkeeping. I think I've seen that on a sweater somewhere. And then after she leaves, they make the delivery, which is a sewing machine, and Ted gives Edwards a nip of Christmas cheer.
Yeah.
AKA whiskey. Meanwhile, there's a blizzard warning now that they don't know about, and we see the ladies at the women at the Olsons, and find out that Reverend Alden is going to his other church this year to do Christmas, which Mrs. Olson finds she doesn't understand it because they give more money. And she also makes a snooty remark about that Charles is giving the sermon instead of the Reverend.
Yeah, she says, "Oh, that'll be quaint." She's the mistress of the backhanded compliment.
And at the school, which of course is also the church, the kids are making various Christmas crafts for their parents. So calendars, and Mary's decorating some sort of candle for Christmas. And these are all things that become important later. I gotta say, this is a well-crafted episode in terms of that kind of stuff. They use every part of the buffalo in this episode, so to speak.
Yes.
And then Willie gets caught eating paste. So he has to go stand in the corner. And he sees it snowing outside, and they all get excited.
It's embarrassing for Willie, but it is refreshing. A TV show of this era, a character is caught with white residue around the nose and mouth area, and it's only paste. So, that's pretty...
Mm-hmm. It's not snuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And Miss Beadle, the teacher, says, once they finish their stuff, she'll send them home early, which becomes a bad decision in a lot of ways. But if they're having the party at the church, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Why would they go home?
Well, wait a minute. The party was going to be the next day, though, right?
Oh, the party's the next day?
I think the party, because one of the...
They're coming back to go to church, for sure.
Because I think Grace says it's going to be like 2 Christmases because they're going to open presents in the morning and have the party later.
I see. They're just waiting to come decorate it once the kids leave. I see. Yeah.
And I actually had forgotten that the school and the church were the same buildings, too. So
I think they are, right?
Well, that would make things make more sense.
Yeah. So I won't question that part of Miss Beadle's decision. And really, she doesn't know what's going to happen. So it's...
No, and, really, early dismissal. Hey, I used to get early dismissals on, Christmas Eve, so...
Sure.
It seems fair.
Walk home?
Well, no, I didn't. I walked home from the bus.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes it was as much as, 500 yards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
And sometimes there were a few flurries in the air, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it was on a 5-degree incline, I'll have you know.
Oh, well. Never mind.
Yeah, that was my own frontier living. It toughened me up, though, for podcasting, so...
Yeah. Did you have a peppermint to suck on while you were walking through the cold? Keep you warm?
I should only be so lucky.
So Charles and Edwards, they're making some rocking horses, and then they're going to go pick up the kids as a surprise. And I believe Edwards is excited that maybe they'll be able to stop at the feed and seed again, so he can get some more whiskey.
Yeah.
Now, I found that interesting because at times in the show he has a good deal of trouble with alcohol. So I guess this isn't one of those periods.
No, he does certainly seem like a functioning alcoholic, though. But in this episode, it certainly played for more than laughs.
Yeah, later it's a good thing.
Yeah.
At the school, the teacher sends them home, except Willie and Nellie, since they live in town and they get to clean the chalkboards.
Well, that's not so much in the Christmas spirit. Did the chalkboards really need cleaning on Christmas Eve?
I don't think so. Even if it's those kids.
Yeah. I thought she was punishing Willie for eating paste, but Nellie, she's suffering for the sins of her idiot brother?
Well, he suffers for her sins a lot, so...
That's a good point.
She might just be suffering for her... It's like Al Pacino winning the Oscar when he did. It's a lifetime
Yeah.
chalkboard cleaning.
Good point.
She's very good in this episode. I mean, she doesn't really do anything, but I mean, in terms of her behavior, I don't remember her doing anything.
No, very subdued. Does she even have... She's got more than maybe one... Does she have any lines of dialogue?
I don't remember.
I don't think she does.
Maybe just a passing thing, but yeah, Willie gets a little more action. But,
right.
And then we see Laura and Mary and Carrie, who was visiting for Christmas Eve, walking in the snow with Carl and Alicia, who are Edwards' kids through marriage, I think.
As Laurie said, so visiting for Christmas Eve basically means Miss Beadle's giving free babysitting since Caroline was busy.
Yeah, I think so.
But she was very gracious about it. She thanked Carrie for joining them, and
it's like maybe it's like preparing her. She's going to come to school soon. So, like when I was in first grade near the end of the year, or kindergarten, we all got to go spend a day with a first grade teacher. Or half a day because it was kindergarten, but to prepare us for what was going to happen.
Did it work?
Well, I think so because it was the same person. I don't know. But I think they just sent our, the whole kindergarten class to that teacher. So, but the next year it was a different, a whole mixed bag of people, new kids and stuff. So I don't know. I just know it was the same teacher. I don't think we had to do anything. It's not like we suddenly learned math or something.
Just kind of ease you into the environment a little bit.
Yeah, and it was a different location. The kindergarten was not in the school. It was just in the streets. That was my frontier life.
So it was really a big step up going to first grade.
Oh, yeah. You got to be inside. Anyway, Edwards and Charles are riding in their wagon, and he's telling some story about the time he was trapping beaver and a storm came in like this. I feel like he's like Uncle Charlie on My Three Sons.
Yeah.
He's always got a story about some adventure. And really, he could have just told the story of the pilot episode where he trudges through the snow to bring them Christmas presents.
Right.
On the prairie. In his underwear. His long johns.
Maybe the beaver trapping, it was one of his rare sober adventures, and
Yeah.
it's easier for him to provide details on that one.
Right. And he gets in the back of the wagon to stay warm. And he has some whiskey there. So even though he's itching to get back to Ted's.
Yeah, minor point. I think he didn't he have maybe brandy in the wagon, and
is that brandy?
I think it was because I think I noticed that, and actually that's another brilliant detail if I've got it right. That if he just had any booze, it wouldn't be a big deal, but he's got whiskey to look forward to, and he's only got brandy in the back of the wagon. So did he order that from the catalog? I wonder. I don't remember going to Sears or JCPenney to pick up a lot of whiskey back in the 80s.
That's true, but back then you could buy anything in the catalog. You could buy a house in the catalog.
Yes, you could. I mean, that sewing machine that they picked up was almost as big as a house.
Yeah, I'm sure it's one of those, big wrought iron things.
Yeah. Worth every penny of that $17, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Plus the degradation that he suffered by stealing the money to pay for it and deceiving his wife for so long. That's the Christmas spirit, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like the gift of the Magi.
Yeah.
He got her a sewing machine, and she got him
She sold her whole wardrobe and all her thread to make up the $17 difference.
Yes, yeah. Good thing the next episode is Rumpelstiltskin comes to Walnut Grove. She gets to sow some straw.
Yes, but then unfortunately Rumpelstiltskin gets scarlet fever by the end of the episode. And things take a turn.
Yeah. Back in this one, all the ladies head over to the church, and, of course, one of them, I think it's Grace, Mrs. Edwards, says, good thing the kids aren't out in this.
Yeah.
And they get there, and of course, they are all out in it, except for Willie. And, the mothers look scared at this point because it's coming down pretty hard, and Miss Beadle gets upset, and then Charles and Edwards arrive. And Charles immediately takes charge and says they're going to go organize all the men.
Yeah.
And go look for the kids. And the women stay there, and it's like the wind breaks some of the glass in the windows.
Yeah, and it happens like Lori and I were laughing when we were watching this because it happens like almost right after they leave. Like right after Charles and Edwards go out, bam, a window's crashed. It's like already it's gone from bad to disaster.
But it is good. I like the way all these actors are registering what's happening. Like, they don't really talk about it, but you see it on their faces.
That's true. And like you said, Charles is in charge. Trying to avoid saying it like that, but right away he knows they have to do something, and they don't spend a lot of time because they don't want to. He doesn't want to worry anybody else, but he just knows it's the thing to do. He doesn't even really hesitate. And Edwards too. But part of it is that it's their own kids out there too.
Yeah. And they do tell Edwards he needs some warmer clothes. He should get some at the Mercantile. That's where they're headed. I guess that's why he's drinking too.
Yeah.
Colder than he expected.
I think it's Mrs. Olson that says that too, right?
Yes.
A nice turn of decency for her, instead of, complaining or making him leave a receipt for it or something.
Yeah, or being like, you're going to wear that out there?
Yes. Which, especially impressive considering her own two kids are in there. They're safe, so I give her credit for that.
And we see the girls in the snow. So, yeah, Carl and Alicia, and the Edwards kids, they went off in a different direction. So now it's just the three girls. And I like this. Like, Mary really takes charge in this episode.
Yeah.
She also often has to take a backseat to Laura, who's, more adventurous. But it's good to see. She gets to be the big sister.
Yeah, she's keeping Carrie's spirits up and trying to guide them.
Yes, and Laura drops the calendar that she made in the snow, and Mary's like, oh, you're just going to have to leave it because they got to keep going.
And then, like a few seconds later, we see it's right down there in the ground in front of her, so, she must not have done a great job of looking, but, it is a blizzard, so I'll cut her some slack, yeah.
And it's a plot point.
Yeah.
Mary says that. She's like, no, we need that as a plot point later. So leave that there.
Right.
Oh, right. And we see all the men are gathered at the Mercantile, and Doc Baker comes in. He says he already found 3 kids and took them over to the schoolhouse. And we see Jim Bowers arrive. He's looking for Joey. And McGinnis saw him and his son Henry at the Feed and Seed. And I don't know where. I guess they were headed. I guess they don't live at the Feed and Seed. So he at least saw them.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know where they are now. And I think it's here. There's a good thing where I think Lars is like, ask Nels why he's going out if his kids are safe. Well, why are you going out? You don't even have any kids. It's just because they're being good citizens.
Right. It's a nice touch, that supports the overall vision of the show. And that's one thing I do like about it is there's a lot of episodes that just show basic decency, and it's no wonder that people respond to that. You don't always get a lot of that, and this episode does give you that. And yeah, that's a great example. I like that little touch too.
And then we see Carl carrying his sister. Speaking of that decency, and Doc Baker comes back to the school. He got supplies. He got some brandy and blankets, and he's preparing the women for dealing with the kids when they come in because they're probably going to have frostbite. Also at the store, it came up right that they're short on kerosene.
Yeah,
the delivery for that didn't come in. So, and then we get some scenes of like what I expected of this episode: people walking through the snow shouting their kids' names.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the blizzard action alternates between adults wandering around and like low angle shots of kids' feet.
Yes. And they're scared and all of that.
And like close-ups, so it does about an effective job as you could probably in a TV budget of getting across like the claustrophobia of the blizzard and just sort of the impending doom and everything. And also like the editing is really good in this. The editing and the music is very effective. The way they cut between scenes and just sort of show like the increasing tension. It's well done. It's a very dramatic episode, and like little things like that really add to the narrative.
Right. And the next scene at the school, when you're seeing what's going on to the kids that have been rescued already, it kind of reinforces the danger that the kids that are out there are in. So like there's a girl who's got frostbite and she's really hurting, I guess, because it's her circulation's coming back, but the doctor has to give her laudanum, which hopefully not too much.
Yes.
We don't. I know there's an episode later where Albert becomes a morphine addict or something, but we don't need that here.
No.
And there's a nice thing where Willie comforts Miss Beadle and says it's not her fault, which really it isn't. I mean,
yeah, Miss Beadle's has not been really actively engaged in helping things. It's like a lot of these shots, she's kind of in the back, crying or on the verge of tears, and yeah, she feels awful. It's kind of sad that it takes a paste eater like Willie to reassure her. A paste-eating dullard, but I guess it's a good thing that somebody said it because the other mothers weren't exactly lining up to comfort her.
No.
I mean, granted, they were busy, but, I don't know. This decision by Beadle is... things did change very quickly. It's not like they have alerts or accurate weather forecasts, and... I'm just going to go ahead and say it here. I got a big problem with the premise of this episode. Really, it should be reasonable for her to expect the kids to be able to get home in plenty of time before, it can go to a big blizzard like that. I mean, how far away does everybody live?
Right.
Laura and Mary don't live that far away.
But they are outside of town, but it's a mile or something maybe.
I think this is one of the big examples of creative license that the show has taken, because really this should not have happened. All the kids would have had time realistically to get home before it got that bad. So I'm defending Miss Beadle a little bit, and I don't eat paste. For the record, I don't eat paste anymore.
Oh, anymore. Okay. Henry McGinnis comes in and he's in really bad shape. But he says Joey went out looking for rabbit tracks, which seems like a very bad idea.
Yeah, I don't understand what the motivation there was. Was he gonna, try to find a good rabbit hutch to, hole up in and ride the storm out there, or what? But
he just seems obsessed with hunting.
Yeah. I'm not sure he's ready for that rifle. He'll shoot his eye out anyway.
Yeah. And we see the girl, they're like nowhere near home, and they're kind of arguing about which way to go. And we see Jim is still out looking. He's looking for Joey, but he's with Ted.
Yes,
Jim and Ted are out there looking for Joey, and then they find Joey, but no Henry. So Jim, has to take Joey back to the church.
Says, yeah, the Doc will know what to do.
Yeah, but Ted stays out there.
Yeah, I mean, this is like one of the really sad aspects of things, because they don't know that the other kid is back there already.
Right, that's where you need a cell phone.
Yeah, or at least like a portable telegraph, like a
right.
One of those handheld telegraph deals.
Oh yeah, that everyone had back there.
Yeah. I guess they couldn't afford those in Walnut Grove.
Yeah, but boy, those stories you hear about people walking with the telegraph wires just trailing behind them.
Well, you know how they did that though. They'd sell you the portable telegraphs real cheap, but then they'd get you on the wire. Cost was super expensive.
And then the girls they're near a farm, and Mary remembers that there's a shed there, so they're gonna head to that shed because the farm is burned down, of course.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure at first. It seemed like Mary had kind of blundered because Laura reminded them that farm burned down a while ago. But Mary's like, I remember a shed. I'm not sure if it was just good improvisation by Mary or what, but she did get them some shelter. So
I'm gonna believe she had a plan. She knew if they went that way, they would find that shed, and it'd be easier to get there than home at that point, or back to town. And more stuff back at the church, learning that Ted is still out there. And the girls find the shed, and they start a little fire because they have Mary's candle and matches. So that gift worked out. And Carrie seems to have some frostbite because her feet are burning.
Mm.
And then Charles and Edwards are near there, and they're about to head the other direction when Charles finds Laura's present on the ground. See? It all worked out.
Yeah, they must have come this far.
Yeah. And we see Ted, and he passes out in the snow, and his lantern fades.
He was just resting his eyes for a few minutes.
Yes.
But,
right.
That was tough. It was tough.
And then Charles finds, they see the fire and they find the girls, and they got to get out of there, of course, because the fire is probably going to catch the barn on fire soon, because, they lit some of the straw and stuff. But Edwards has to go out looking for his kids. So now we have to worry about him.
Yeah, and this is kind of another mostly unspoken bit of business between Charles and Edwards. And, it's kind of cool that Michael Landon and Victor French were, I guess, really good friends and had a long career together and survived Victor French leaving to go star in Carter Country, which, Carter Country, I believe, killed many relationships in the late 70s. But They have a great chemistry on screen together too. I mean, they're good friends, and again, it's just like there's no hard feelings, but it's just they each of them has to do what they have to do.
Yeah, and we know if you've seen enough episodes, you know how much Edwards cares about the Ingalls kids.
Right.
So he wants to see them safe.
Yeah, and Charles, hates to see Edwards, but Charles every now and then, believe it or not, Charles does know his limitations.
Yes.
In this the case, he's got to get his kids to safety. So, and because they didn't know until this point that the Edwards and the Ingalls kids had separated.
Right, and Charles and the kids are walking, and Charles stumbles on Ted, and of course he's died, and they just have to keep moving.
Yeah. I mean,
that's a pretty heavy thing. Not just that he died, but the at least Laura sees it, and he's like, "Oh, we gotta keep going."
He at least does the decency of not stripping him for clothes and taking his, for parts. But I think he's also got to keep the kid steady and not have them be broken up about this or horrified by it, because they've all got to focus. So he's got to take the emotional burden so that they don't have to.
And back at the school, like Grace wants to go out. They're waiting, and she gets kind of hysterical.
Yeah, you know what has happened to Grace at this point? I've seen it happen before. She's gone snow crazy.
Oh, snow crazy.
She got the snow madness, and amazingly, she doesn't get slapped. I think Doc has to shake her a little bit, though.
Yes, yeah. Wasn't that one of the books, Snow Madness in the Little House?
Yeah, I think so.
And, Charles and the girls arrive, and he breaks the news to Grace that Edwards is out there, and then he wants to go back out, but he's just too worn out.
Doc basically puts him on the disabled list. He says, you can't go back out.
And I like that Doc Baker character.
Yeah, he keeps a strong head in this and organizes well. You can tell the basic decency that the character has, but he's also stern when he has to be, and is clear and calm and collected, which is essential. And I like the fact that probably wasn't necessary, but the fact that he sort of like holds Charles and like kind of tells him he can't go. That sort of gives Charles another out for not going back, because Charles wanted to go back, and no reasonable person would be disappointed with Charles for not going back out at this point.
And then we hear Lottie's reaction to the news.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, this is one thing now. So Charles tells Doc and makes Doc tell her, which is understandable because Doc is used to delivering bad news, I guess. But Charles did not share the news with Lottie.
And then, we see Edwards searching and yelling, of course. And then Charles is sleeping on a pew, and he wakes up and opens the shutters, and it's morning, and the storm's over, and just then Edwards arrives. And it turns out Carl had built a snow house, and and then he gave them some brandy. He says something about them being hungover.
Yeah.
But they were giving the other kids brandy too.
Yeah.
To warm them up and all that.
Yeah. So nobody missed out.
No.
They all got their taste.
Sure, one girl's laudanum addiction began that day.
Yeah.
Kids' alcoholism, but still, it was a day most of them got through a blizzard. And everyone is happy, of course, except for Lottie and Joey, who are standing off.
Yeah, you say most of them, and it's kind of a dramatic. Yeah, it's kind of a dramatic scene because everybody's celebrating, and it's a kind of a cause for euphoria, but there's the shot of the widow and her son just kind of standing there, and yeah, it's kind of rough, actually.
It is, and then Charles is looking at him, and Michael Landon's registering a lot of pain on his face. And it's a good moment, and then he walks over and picks up the Bible and reads about the birth of Jesus, and I believe it's the same passage that Linus recites in the Charlie Brown Christmas special.
Much of it, yes. I don't think he said, and this shall be a sign unto you. But yeah, a lot of it, and I'm not sure. I thought it was kind of ambiguous. The reaction. I mean, there's a certain bravery there by the widow and her son. But at first it almost seemed like they were. How did you read that? Was it a mixture of sadness? Was it resentment?
It seemed like yeah. I mean, there's just so much they would be going through. But
yeah, especially before he did the sermon, and then even after the sermon, they're kind of standing up apart a little bit. It's kind of like dramatic the way they look and everything. It was a little ambiguous there.
Well, and there was a scene earlier where Grace expressed a sort of resentment. I mean, she was uncomfortable with it, but that her kids weren't some of the ones that had come back yet, or her husband.
Yeah,
for that matter. And I think that's a natural thing. And then that actress playing Lottie had a pretty good scowl.
Yeah. And I mean, Charles' gesture is it's easy to forget that it's Christmas. It's funny because it didn't feel like much of a Christmas episode until it didn't really feel like Christmas Eve, and it's kind of funny because it's like, is everybody really thrown off by a snowstorm on Christmas in Minnesota? But I guess Charles, I don't know. It's an interesting ending there. What did you think about that ending?
I thought it worked. It was just a gesture to bring a little, maybe to give everyone a little more hope.
I mean, what can you say?
But yeah, and I mean, I guess I wouldn't use that as a reminder of like, well, this is why we did well, because then it implies that Ted is at fault for some reason.
Right, right.
That he didn't believe or something. But, it does seem like he's definitely trying to comfort everyone, and maybe even himself.
Yeah, I think that, and also placing this event in the context of something larger, I guess, is what he's doing. Like, this was a natural event, a catastrophe that nobody saw coming, and they had to deal with it and everything, and it's kind of like bring everybody, maybe not just comfort, but just perspective, or attempting to. I mean, really, to be fair, what else could he say?
Yeah, and the other reason he's doing it is because I think to calm them down.
Yeah.
So that they're being less cheerful.
Yeah, right.
By having this somber moment. It's kind of, even though he's talking, it's a moment of silence in a way.
Right. And like, Edwards doesn't know most of what else has happened. It is interesting, and this is another good indication of why people point to Little House on the Prairie as a faith-based show. Is many things that you could say about the culture and the nature of television at the time. There aren't that many shows that not only one have regular church-going scenes, but would end, on this kind of note, with just him reading a passage from the Bible like that. So I think it stands out. And it's funny, Mike, that like today, even though in some ways you might think that things are more conservative or more, but you have less mainstream religion on mainstream television than probably ever before. And Little House on the Prairie was a show that did have, had a reverend as the regular character. It had people talking to God. The Charles Ingalls character would kind of address God. It had characters praying. So yeah, this is, I guess, a good example of how the show did sometimes center things on faith.
And don't forget, it had Laura meeting at least an emissary of God in the form of Ernest Borgnine.
Oh, yes. I did forget that, because I have not seen that episode yet.
She went bowling with him. And then she brought bowling back to Walnut Grove, like Moses bringing the 10 Commandments down.
She brought the 10 pins,
yes,
and set them all up.
One interesting thing, and I believe that episode is one of the ones that's a rewrite of a Bonanza episode. But
wow,
the character's name is Jonathan, which is the name of Michael Landon's character on Highway to Heaven, or Jonathan Smith, of course.
Yes.
So I prefer to think that maybe it's the same Jonathan.
Oh, interesting.
He caught a glimpse of Charles Ingalls and like, maybe that's what my form should be.
Yes. Yeah. Nothing against Ernest Borgnine, but
yeah, look at that hair.
Yeah, I can accomplish so much more with this hair.
Yes. And maybe I'll find that Mr. Edwards guy in the future. Walk around with him. But in all seriousness, I mean, even though it's maybe not the most realistic show, you can't really do a show set in the frontier of America and not address religion. No,
and the church was really the center of a lot of social activity and just organization of things. So yeah.
Even Deadwood had a minister of sorts.
That's right.
So whatever reservations I might have, I just about religion, I certainly don't have them about it being in this show. And there are other supernatural things, like the Halloween episode I saw ended with Laura and Carl seeing the Headless Horseman.
Yes.
So I don't know, with no explanation.
And make no mistake, though, also Little House on the Prairie, with the way it dealt with issues and social issues and things, it was actually a fairly progressive show. The series itself took strong positions against racism and prejudice, and so it's an interesting program. I do think it stands out, but and the religion is mostly kind of small c Christianity, just in a general faith-based way that I could see a lot of people respond to it, but I can also see it appealing. You can look into it as just more of a family-centric, morality-based show without being overwhelmed by the religion if you're not looking for that, or if you're not interested in that.
Yeah. Another thing, I mean, I think it definitely comes up in the pilot, and I think it comes up in other shows too, episodes. Charles specifically having like internal conflict about the choices he makes for the family, which I don't know if the real one did, but the real one, and it comes up in the show, did keep kind of taking chances on these big moves. Like, nothing's going here. Let's go to the prairie and make our own home where no one else lives, which is a huge risk. So in the pilot, that's what the pilot's about. Like, multiple times he sort of has a lot of doubt and sort of self-recrimination, and Carolyn is sometimes upset about what they've done. Like, why are they living in a house with a dirt floor, and why are they dealing with what they are? Why didn't they just go to a town? And I think that's good that they're questioning that. Because you look at it from a distance, like, was this the best thing to be doing? Traipsing all over the Midwest and West with your kids.
Yeah, and I think they raised the issue of, is it pride that's doing this rather than, making the actual best decision? Is it just because, well, he wants his independence, and he can be stubborn at times too, and set in his ways. He's not perfect, but you know what? He must have seemed, in many ways, he probably did seem like a perfect father figure to a lot of people back then. And of course, his relationship with Half Pint, Laura, was a big part of the show, and maybe one of the most affectionate parent-child relationships on TV in those days.
And what do you think of Half Pint?
What Mr. Edwards had stashed in his shirt pocket, or the nickname Half Pint?
Laura as a character.
Interesting, because I'm well on the record with my disdain for many child characters. However, this is a child character on a show, kind of built around her. I have no problem with the character. I enjoy her performance in general.
I enjoy her performance. I find the character frustrating sometimes.
Really?
Just because she's... I mean, I guess in ways you're supposed to, in a way, but because she's so headstrong, even though she's one of the good girls, she gets herself and other people into a lot of trouble. Like the thing with the patent medicines. Like, Mary wasn't going to do that.
Yeah.
And Laura just sort of, not quite bullied her, but, she made it happen. And even when it was clear it was a disaster, she wouldn't let go. She kept trying. Like, some guy comes to their house pretending to be poor so he can get some food, and then she tries to use that strategy to sell medicine to someone. But it's just like, aren't you one of the Ingalls kids?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. It just kind of like, it's driving the story, but it's a little frustrating. I mean, obviously Nellie is much worse.
Yeah.
In her way. But
I can see that. I guess for me, like, some of what you're describing, I would be frustrated more just in the way that, like, TV characters frustrate me because they make poor decisions rather than, her, and maybe I give her a little bit more slack because she is a kid. So I see what you're saying, but yeah, the character...
I guess she seems a little selfish sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Or maybe not even selfish is the right word, but just moving ahead with whatever it is she's after without thinking about the consequences to other people.
Self-absorbed and not really looking at the big picture a lot. I think as I've been like watching a lot of episodes too, I've been selecting ones more centered on the grown-ups, especially after, kind of going beyond the first season. Because for me, like, I'm more interested in some of the grown-up characters and how they interact and some of the wacky situations they find themselves in.
Yeah. And I guess it's weird for me to criticize her for being that way right after praising the fact that Charles is that way as a piece of writing. So criticism withdrawn.
Well, yeah, but I mean, Charles has like a little bit of self-awareness and reflection, which makes it resonate more, whereas Half Pint usually has to be told that she did wrong.
Yes. Right.
I mean, she might see the error of her ways, but not until maybe somebody else points it out to her.
Right. Or like this I don't know if you saw that Halloween episode.
I did not, no.
Okay, well, all the kids are out soaping the Olsen's windows, which is his idea, by the way, so he can save on soap. And she thinks she sees him cut off Mrs. Olsen's head, which is not what happens. But, and then she's trying to convince everyone this happened. And Carl, her best friend, she gets him roped into this scheme and keeps using that card. Well, your best friend stand up for you and all that. And at one point he's like, I wish I had a different best friend. And I feel like maybe that sums up what I'm trying to say.
Did she keep gasping like Costello and bah, 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 and claiming she sees something, and then, Carl say, oh, don't be ridiculous, Laura, come on. Quit messing around. We got windows to soap. But I saw...
No, she mostly just kind of stared.
Oh.
her go-to reaction. And had a weird conversation with Mr. Olsen.
I see.
Yeah, and then Nellie finds this out, and she tries to use it to scare them. So, but as usual, gets her own.
Gets her comeuppance.
Yeah. It's kind of an amusing episode.
Yeah. Well, you got 20-some episodes a season, and they can't all be about, like milking a cow or something like that. So.
Right. Or, tornadoes.
Yeah. And I was talking to you about, you go through the episode descriptions, and there are a lot of them that seem interesting, So I'm kind of enjoying going through, but I think I'm going to keep going through like the back and keep going through the first season, which I'm enjoying. But yeah, I've seen some good ones, but not too many from the later years. Now, I wanted to check out a little Jonathan Garvey, Merlin Olsen, who was the sort of de facto replacement for Victor French there for a while as Charles's best friend and another bearded guy. And then he, went on to Father Murphy. So, like seeing Merlin Olsen on there.
He's definitely different spirit than Mr. Edwards, right?
Yes. More of a gentler type of soul. And he doesn't go around singing that Dan Tucker song like every other episode.
Right.
I don't think Merlin Olsen did a lot of singing on NBC football. He wasn't like Don Meredith, where he'd sing like anytime there was like a first down of more than 15 yards, he'd start singing. But Merlin Olsen was a little bit more restrained.
Wonder if they ever got Dick Enberg to do a cameo on Father Murphy.
I was wondering if he did a cameo on Little House, but I did see the baseball episode, which I rather enjoyed, which had Mr. Edwards in it. But
That's where like a traveling team comes to town.
well, I think it's actually Sleepy Eye's team, so I think it's their rival, like their Shelbyville, if you will. Which I guess they say in this episode is the other congregation that Reverend Alden has.
Yeah.
So they got a big rivalry, but and they get like a new pitcher, that they think is going to give them a big edge, and there becomes gambling gets involved, and Mr. Edwards is drafted to play, and it's I don't know. I'm a sucker for a good baseball episode, so I'd recommend that one too. I think it's in the second or third season. Yeah, I mean, just a lot happens to these characters over the years, and they change and they age. In 9 seasons, a lot is going to happen. But they also seem to do that thing where they keep bringing on younger kids whenever possible.
Right, yeah, adopting kids.
Yeah. I called it very watchable, and I'll stick to that. This kind of show is somehow in my wheelhouse. It's very easy for me to sit down and watch an episode and get wrapped up in it. I don't quite know what it is. I guess we've explained a lot of the things that are appealing to it or about it. But yeah, I actually really enjoy watching this show, and I'm going to watch more of it.
Well, I hope Ryan is satisfied. Again, we mentioned it. Your friend Ryan happened to mention on our Facebook group that we needed some Michael Landon and Victor French on this, unwittingly, days before we recorded this.
Yes, if you want to join us on our Facebook group and make suggestions or even, point out, areas in which the podcast has been lacking, we are open to that, but we can't guarantee that they'll always be seemingly answered this directly. Yeah, this one's, I think it really is almost 10 seasons in the making, this episode.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, join us there. And this is the finale of season 10, but not too long from now. We're not sure when, but we'll have our Batty Awards, of course. Maybe some Little House people will be up for Batty Awards. I don't know if we're going to have a best hair category, but if we do, I think we know there's at least one nominee already.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And yeah, I want to thank everybody for following us in this 10th season. A lot of episodes. This may be one of our most family-centric and 2 to 11-year-old centric seasons we've had, Mike. But also some controversial shows, some gentler shows. But I think you and I have learned a lot of lessons along the way too. I'm not sure what they are, but we've learned them.
Yeah, okay.
Don't ask me to tell you what they are.
We've absorbed them, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll think about that.
All right, yeah.
Maybe that can be a category this year on the Baddies. Best lesson learned.
That'd be good. Yeah. Did we really learn all that much? I don't know, but
well, Mr. Rogers, I'm sure we learned something from him.
Yeah.
Spider-Man has amazing friends.
Yeah, I'm sure we learned.
Yeah. There's a lot of friendship in this season.
There sure is.
We had the amazing friends. We had some bosom buddies.
We had the true blue friendship between Macmillan and Enright.
Yes. The true blue friendship between Maud and Arthur.
Yeah. Yeah. That's more of a red-blue relationship, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, and the value of community in this episode, and Brandy.
Yes. I look forward to this year's Baddies, and it's always a good way to kind of look back and do a little overview of the season. But I think it's been a great season. I once again thank everybody that listens to the show. Special shout out to those in our Facebook group who helped us. They voted for one of our episodes. I think it's safe to say we'll get people involved in the Baddies somehow. If you want to be part of all this, just go to Facebook, search Battle of the Network Shows, and it's very easy to join. Just answer a few basic, simple questions, and you're in. And then you can join the conversation and talk about Little House on the Prairie, the other shows we've talked about in season 10, or anything that we've talked about, or the stuff that we have not yet talked about.
Yes, and that's all I got.
Well, it's quite a bit. Little House on the Prairie, I think, took a lot out of us. It took a lot out of me. This was a tense and dramatic episode. Rewarding, but it was tough. And in fact, I should say that our official cat of the show, Lemmy, was sitting on my lap, but he got up and left during the episode, and we think it's because when he was kind of a rescue cat, he had frostbite. He's got some scar tissue on his ears, and I think this was hit a little too close to home for him.
Oh, I didn't know that's where that came from. I thought he was just a professional boxer.
Yeah. In another of his 9 lives, maybe. But so a warning to this episode of the Little House might not be cat friendly, but of course we try to keep our podcast cat friendly at all times, as well as dog friendly.
Whatever pet, bird.
Yeah.
I guess rat, weasel.
There's a episode of Little House where they adopt a raccoon.
Of course.
Who tears through their storage and almost destroys their whole place. But again, a lesson learned.
I feel like there's one with like a chimpanzee or an orangutan.
Well, that was... You sure not thinking of Abbott and Costello again?
Well,
I do find it hard to believe that Michael Landon would have been able to
Yes.
resist working with a chimpanzee at some point. He would have thought it as a challenge.
Edwards is left in the care of a baby orangutan named Blanche, who Mrs. Olsen wants destroyed after it attacks Nancy at school.
What?
Nancy? Who's Nancy?
Oh, Nancy was the replacement for Nellie.
Oh, okay. So this is a later episode. Because Edwards comes back, right? Edwards is left in the...
Yes. He returns from Carter Country and rejoins he misses like a couple seasons in the middle, and then he sort of replaces Jonathan Garvey, and I think he's there till the end, I think, or in like season 6, I think he comes back.
This is a season 7 premiere. No, season 9, episode 20. Sorry. So almost the end.
Wow.
For
So
the love of Blanche.
this is a real episode you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
And on IMDb. Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about replacement Nellie.
Is this a crossover with Mr. Smith or something, or
Well, it is 1983.
or Manimal?
March 7th, 1983.
Oh gosh.
And they might have named it after the woman who developed the show.
Oh boy.
There's a picture, all sorts of photos. There's the orangutan wearing like Mr. Edwards' hat, I think. Reverend Alden. There's Shannon Doherty in the orangutan.
Oh jeez.
Edwards holding it. Mr. Olsen freaking out. I guess he brought it in the store. That's a little rude.
Well, I'm sure the orangutan had good things to say about how Michael Landon ran the set, but yeah, I don't know about this. This sounds a little sketchy.
Yeah, and Michael Landon directed that episode.
Okay.
Oh, and he wrote it too. Boy, he really must have been bored.
Tell me that one wasn't recycled from a Bonanza episode.
I bet it was.
I don't want to see Lauren Green monkeying around on Bonanza.
He would be great with it. I bet he's really good with assuming that it happens.
Yeah?
I could just see him reacting very kind of deadpan.
Yeah, well,
An orangutan.
he was good with a daggett.
That's right. On that note, I think we should wrap up this episode.
Okay, well, yeah, Little House, Blizzard, oh, it was something, but in the end, almost all of us got out of it okay.
See you soon. Okay.
This episode brought to you by Olson's Mercantile, all your frontier needs with a side of attitude. This episode also brought to you by Walnut Grove Hand-Cranked Ice Cream, your 3 favorite flavors in convenient half pints. This episode also brought to you by Little House of Pancakes. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.